You're going to prison for life this time, Cassanova. You see, here in Champion City, we still do a fairly brisk trade. Injustice.
I thought it was all about publicity and keeping your sponsors happy.
See, it's that kind of cynicism that I truly feel is starting to poison society. Oh, looky here.
Okay, retro go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies and specifically talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 319. And our movie this week from 1999 is Mystery Men. And here to talk with me about it, because he had not seen it before, it's Ryan Estrada. Ryan, how are you?
I am doing great. It's early in the morning here in South Korea, and watched this movie for the first time last night, and I was surprised that I hadn't seen it. It's like one of those movies that I would assumed I'd seen, but back in the 90s, this came out when I worked at a movie theater, so I'd seen, I think, the last 4 minutes waiting to clean the theater about 67 times, and I just kind of, when you mentioned it, I'm like, well, I've seen that. And I'm like, wait, have I? I don't remember anything about it other than the ending, maybe the beginning, and then the one scene in the middle where I'd go check and make sure everything was okay with the air conditioning. But yeah, I'd never seen this movie.
Huh. Well, that is, you were familiar with it from that, but
Yeah.
outside of that, like, did you know it was based on a comic book or any of that?
Yeah. I mean, as a kid, I was very much into comic books. I'm a cartoonist, and I knew what was
Okay.
going on. I remember finding it very weird that they were making a flaming carrot movie without the flaming carrot in it. um and just like going at, taking, the at that time, they're trying a lot with comic book movies, because like Batman had done well, and like there was that whole period where they didn't know how to react to Batman's success, and they were like, at first they were like, oh well, people must like movies about old shady serial characters. That's when you got the Shadow and Dick Tracy and all that. And then they were like,
Yep.
well, let's try comic book characters, but the people wanted to try it didn't have the rights to the big characters. So that's when you got all those 90s comic book characters, and these guys, they had the rights to Flaming Carrot, but they're like, how do we make that into a movie? And I guess I read that they were afraid it was going to turn out like Howard the Duck if they tried to do any special effects to make a man with a carrot head. So they're like, well, what about these background characters that literally no one on the earth knows who they are unless they've read the
Yeah.
specific issue of this comic book? So let's go for it. And they did it. And yeah, I it was a long time ago. I'm getting old now, so I can't remember exactly what I was thinking about not going to see it. But I, I knew it was there, and I guess I just missed it.
So yeah, I remember this coming out in '99. I was definitely in the midst of going to a lot of movies at the time. I did not see this in the theater though. I remember all the marketing for it, and it just summer of 1999. There was a lot going on. So this initially was going to actually come out the very end of July '99, and then Universal pushed it back a week because they didn't want to compete with the Blair Witch Project. Which came out and had a bunch of buzz going into it. So they pushed it back by a week. I remember seeing Blair Witch Project in the theater. And I think something else came out the same week as this that I maybe went and saw, but it was also the summer that The Sixth Sense was out. So a lot of people were going to that over and over. And this one kind of got lost a little bit in the shuffle. And then I remember seeing it a few months later when it hit home video. And I liked it immediately the first time I saw it. I enjoyed it, knowing nothing about it. I did not know the comic that it was based on. I maybe had seen a Flaming Carrot comic, on a shelf or something somewhere, but I just wasn't that familiar with kind of the non-Marvel and DC comics at that time. But I just remember thinking, this is kind of a silly parody of superheroes. And I sort of enjoyed it then, and then it kind of disappeared, and I didn't really think about it for a while. And when I revisited it recently, like within the last few years, I remember having conversations about it. And it's very much an early version of things that would come later in film. Deconstructing superheroes had been around in comics for a little while, but film and television hadn't really played with that a whole lot yet. And so this doing that I thought was really, really interesting. What did you think overall, just as kind of a first time watch of the film? What did you think of it as a film?
Yeah, it was a lot cartoonier than I remember, and I think that might have been one of the things that put me off at first because I love cartooniness, especially
Mhm.
at that time in '99. I was obsessed with Looney Tunes. I'd watch them day and night. But
Oh
there
yeah.
was kind of an insincere cartooniness that happens sometimes, where it feels
Mhm.
like someone's like, "Ah, this is what these nerds like, isn't it?" Where you get all those like weird, like fisheye lens close-ups of people's faces
Mhm.
and things like that feel like someone committing to a bit that they don't get. Um, and reading about it afterward, I kind of feel like, I read about like Kinka Usher, the director, like hating
Mhm.
making the movie so much that he quit the industry and went back to making Volvo commercials. I read
Yeah.
about Greg Kinnear and Ben Stiller fighting so hard on the set that Stiller tried to quit the film and didn't want to make
Yeah.
it, and he was forced to. And yeah, it felt like people making a movie that they didn't understand, and that makes it fascinating. It's really fun to watch this
Oh yeah.
weird blend of like it's very much in the vein of that 90s wave of indie comic movies, but trying to be like the big budget Batman movies of the time. I read they even like
Yeah.
reused some of the Batman Forever sets, I think I read. So
Mhm.
it's a very weird mix of two tones. It's fascinating to watch, but it has this insincere feeling to me overall.
I can see that. The stories behind making this movie are utterly interesting to me, and in some ways more so than the film itself. The film has a pretty simple sort of plot structure going on, but it comes down to these characters. But what I found interesting in reading about it, and I knew a little bit of this already, but I kind of dove in a little more this past week, is you mentioned Kinka Usher, the director. So he made his name directing commercials, and he did commercials you saw in the 90s. The Got Milk ads were him. The Taco Bell Chihuahua, that was his company. He did some Volvo and Acura ads, and like he won awards. He started his own production company. Like he was big time in commercials, and he was not the first choice to direct this. And actually, it was Danny DeVito was originally going to direct this and star in it as the shoveler. Um, it's always fascinating to me to think about other directors and or actors in films and how different that would be. Danny DeVito playing that role of the shoveler feels so different to me than the way William H. Macy plays it.
Mhm.
Um, and I almost want to slip into that alternate universe and see that version because I think that would be fascinating. But he he DeVito kind of had disagreements about the direction of the music, and so ended up backing out of the project. Then Ben Stiller was going to direct it. They offered it to him. And he had, I think, what year was The Cable Guy? Was that 95? Was that 90? Oh, that was a little bit after that. It was like 96 or 97, I think. But that hadn't done very well. But they offered it to him, and he ended up saying, I don't want to direct this because it was going to be too big of a project. And he was like, no. And so he left. And then they end up giving it to Kinka Usher, who, as you said he hated it. He just hated making this, like everything about it. And I kind of get that, right? Like if you come from the world of commercials, you're making 30 seconds, a minute and a half, these little short things where you can just get in, get out, tell a tiny little part of a story, and that's it. And now all of a sudden you go from that to a 2 hour film at Universal Pictures. Like this isn't a small independent studio either. Um, I can see that being just a big change and kind of souring yourself on that because I think another director that did similar was not so much from commercials, but Stephen Norrington, who did the first Blade. Um, he a couple years after that did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and hated that whole process. And that movie pretty well ended his like major film career, as well as caused Sean Connery to retire. Um,
Mhm.
and it was kind of the same thing. Like it was it's so big, and you don't think about you always think like as a director getting that big project has got to be kind of a dream thing. But in some ways, it's a double-edged sword, I would think, because all of a sudden now you've got a whole lot of pressure and a whole lot of things to deal
Yeah.
with that on a commercial set you're just not going to have. And so he did basically say, well, I don't want to do any more movies, and went back to making commercials and kept doing that for a number of years. He actually did. I don't know if do you remember the Bridgestone commercial with the screaming animals from like a
Yeah.
decade and a half ago?
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
Kinka Usher
All
did
right.
that.
And you got to imagine that, like, jumping into something like this, not just a big movie, but an ensemble movie
Yeah.
with, it sounds like a large ensemble that all had different ideas of what the tone of the film should be
Mm-hmm.
and were very
Right.
vocal about it, and like had to be talked into coming aboard the movie, and then and then regretted it and argued about it. So there was probably a lot of fighting on that set.
Oh, I'm sure, because even if you have history in directing commercials or even television, film is very different, and the egos at play are very different. And ultimately, a director, you're keeping all the plates spinning, right? So like you've got to deal
Mhm.
with all of that. And I've noticed this sometimes with certain actors when they work with a director who is established versus who isn't, and how different that can be. Like you hear the
Yeah.
stories of Clint Eastwood and the way his sets are, right? Where
Mhm.
he's like, one take, move on. I think it was Matt Damon had one of my favorites where he was working on, I think Eastwood did Invictus. And Matt Damon said, we shot a scene, and he called cut and was ready to move on. And Matt Damon asked him, do you think we should do another take? And Eastwood just looked at him and said, do you really want to waste everyone's time? And he was like, you know what?
Mhm.
No, one take's good. We can move on.
Yeah.
Like, that's Clint Eastwood. I think Kinka Usher probably he doesn't have that kind of gravitas yet,
Yeah.
right? First
Mhm.
film. And you got to deal with Ben Stiller, who had to be convinced to come back to the movie by
Mhm.
Janeane Garofalo. You've got Janeane Garofalo, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria, like Paul Rubens. This is
Yeah.
a stacked cast.
Yeah, and I also read about Janeane Garofalo having to be talked in the movie because, she, at that time, she was known for being very indie, and
Hmm.
and so she said, no, this sounds dorky, I don't want to do it. But then she found out William H. Macy was in it. She's like, oh man, I want to work with William H. Macy though. I
Yeah.
guess it could be interesting. And then when she got there, she's like, this is not what I signed up for. I want to leave. Everyone wanted to leave.
Yeah, and then you're stuck into a contract, and so you've got to do it. And it would be easy, I think, to sleepwalk through something like this. I will say, having watched it, I don't think there's any performances that feel like they didn't do stuff, like they didn't
Mhm.
try. I
Yeah.
do sense a little bit of the competitiveness. When you get a lot of comedians in one spot, two things are going to happen. You're going to coalesce into this wonderful kind of group and really go for
Mhm.
something, or you will get some butting of heads, right? Because comedians
Mhm.
all want to be the funny one. They all want to be the last one to go and get that laugh. And uh, especially when you've got Paul Rubens, who's trying to resurrect his career at this point, because this is still within the fallout of his whole um, issues in the early '90s. Uh, and you can sense some of that, but at the same time, something about it for me really works. I think everybody's having, plus like Jeffrey Rush as Casanova Frankenstein. Number one, amazing name,
Mhm.
absolutely amazing. And I think, was it the writer of the original comic did some was on set and helped out with this. What's his name? Bob Burden said that he thinks Universal simply chose Casanova Frankenstein as the villain because they like the name, and I get it.
Mhm.
I would do that too. But Jeffrey Rush is having a ball playing this character. Like he is hamming it up. What did you think of him as a villain?
Yeah, I found him fun. I was really confused the whole time trying to figure out what his shtick was though, because at first he was hanging out with the disco guys and he was making disco puns with them, but then he had like all the other different kinds, and I'm like, oh, does he just use whoever's puns are nearest to him at that moment, or
I think so.
like, yeah, yeah. I really wish he had like been given more of a shtick to do, like with the Frankenstein. I'm like, is he gonna create life or something, or what's he gonna do? But I was always trying to figure out what his bit was, but he leaned into it and just made his bit like, I'm a hammy guy who wants to take over.
Yep, he just wants to rule Champion City, which I also love. And that should have been a giveaway to me back in '99 that this was based off of an existing comic book, because a name like Champion City feels like an independent comic book
Yeah.
thing. Um, which I we don't see a ton of the city. Like, we get a few establishing shots here and there, but a lot of this is shot on sound stages, obviously.
Mhm.
But I loved the look of those wide shots of this like just sprawling mega metropolis city. And then to have the shoveler living like basically across the river, right?
Mhm.
He's in Jersey, across from New York, living in the suburbs. I kind of dug that, but
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah,
there's
those
something
that
about.
early
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, that early chunk of the film, like in the very first scenes, you get so much world building in like the first couple of shots where they're showing the city and it feels very Gotham City, but they're
Hmm.
creating like this world where like the sky is full of zeppelins. Like this is not our world.
Yeah.
And there's
No.
like bits of science and technology that are different from ours and yeah, it's an interesting like uh it starts out feeling like a giant blockbuster, then it kind of slows, it like makes itself smaller into like an indie comedy and like
Hmm.
much simpler sets. So yeah, it's interesting to have that so much up front to like just make you feel like this is not your world. We're not going to explain what it is, but just know some weird stuff happens here.
I wonder how much of that is the commercial director mindset of Kinka Usher. Like, with this, I've got to disseminate a bunch of information really quickly and in a way that isn't exposition, right? Because we don't get a lot of that. There's not a ton of like characters telling you the story so much as, like you said, get some of that world building established right away. And even with our three main guys of Furious, Shoveler, and Blue Raja, Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, and Hank Azaria, doing a wonderfully awful accent the whole time. Um, their interactions are done in such a way that give us a lot of their backstory without them having to say any of
Mhm.
that. Like, they've known each other for a long time. These three characters know each other, they've been friends, and we don't need them to say like, oh, I've known you for 15 years or we've been fighting crime. Like, we don't need that. We just get it from the way that they work together. And I really liked that, and I wonder how much of that was baked into the script and how much of that was kind of made up and ad-libbed by these actors, because I know there was a lot of that going on.
Yeah, yeah. For each of the main three guys, we got that one little scene of their home life.
Hmm.
So I mean, the some of them got those characters came back later, but like with Ben Stiller's character, there was just that one little scene of her yelling at him. But you kind of get like who they are in that moment, and it does feel like a commercial director being like, I can get this done in 36 seconds.
Sure. But I think also it gives the world a more lived in feel at that point,
Mhm.
instead of
Yeah,
having to have somebody explain it to us. Like, we know from the opening scene, which is very Joel Schumacher Batman, right? That whole
mhm,
push in and then the old folks home where they're having
yeah,
some sort of strain. Like, none of that feels, it all feels very odd, but for this world, it's established as just being like a normal Saturday night.
yeah,
Um and then, the red eyes show up, Artie Lang, in a cameo appearance. The red eyes, like, what are they? Who knows? They just wear red goggles. That's all we need. Um, but we get our three main characters that show up, and we learn about them, and then Captain Amazing shows up, and we don't need a big exposition dump of who he is. We just know he is the hero of this
mhm,
city. He is the big cheese around here. And I absolutely adore Greg Kinnear in this role. This is, if you need a good guy that you hate, Greg Kinnear is perfect for that. He's
mhm.
got that punchable face, like he can play that smarmy punchable face guy so well. And then he's of course got the super suit, and it's covered in patches and stickers from all his corporate sponsorships. Which again, in film and television wise, we hadn't had that kind of a joke being played for
Yeah.
superheroes yet.
Mhm.
So I really enjoyed that. But what did you think of Greg Kinnear as Captain Amazing in this?
Yeah, he was great, and that's another of those things of like how well the world building is done. Is you don't have like a let's explain how superheroing works in this world and
Yeah.
how it's funded. You get like you see him appear on screen with a bunch of like Pepsi patches, and you're like, oh, I get it.
Mhm.
There's get corporate sponsors. That's why they do it, and
And even
so you
smoking.
know,
Yeah. Yep. Um, and again, he is just perfect as this type of character. Like he can switch from he shows up, punches a couple guys, and takes care of everything. And then like one of my favorite moments is when he's walking through the crowd, he's talking to his publicist, and he grabs the guy in the wheelchair and kind of like, hey, can I get a flashbulb over here? Gives the smile and then just pushes the wheelchair away
mm,
and keeps walking. The way that that is all timed out is just uh, perfect for me. Like it
mm,
absolutely, it just makes me laugh every single time I see it because he just gets that timing and the patter down perfectly. And then you got Ricky Jay, who I adored Ricky Jay every time he would show up on screen in anything. It didn't matter what it was. Playing the publicist is perfect. He
mhm.
also I'll play some lines, some clips later. He has one that makes me chuckle every single time. Um, but I also like how Captain Amazing has basically so there's always there's the thing where like Batman created his rogues, right? If Batman
Yeah,
doesn't start doing what he's doing, these supervillains don't show up.
yeah,
And here we're getting the opposite thing, which is Captain Amazing is basically too good at what he does and he's run himself out of a job. There's no more supervillains. And without the supervillains, what's a superhero?
yeah,
Um, and I like that he's like he needs to try and figure out a way to drum up more business and more big fights. And so that is the inciting incident that sets the whole plot in motion is he needs a supervillain to keep his corporate sponsors. Like just the silliness of that whole idea gets me. Um, and so that's how he helps his arch nemesis out of the asylum is because he basically needs better ratings is what it
yeah.
boils down to.
Sweeps week.
So, yep, exactly. Exactly that because he's losing his and that was another one is when he's getting asked all the questions by the reporter as he's walking out of the nursing home and he's giving these canned responses and then when she asks him about the Pepsi sponsorship just his face, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know about what is going on here. Like it's just perfect. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Well, while we're talking about the opening scene, did you see what Artie Lang said about his appearance?
I did calling it the worst movie he's ever made.
Well, it was after that. It was he was talking about. I don't know how much of it was a joke or how much it was reality, but he said that his mom and sister went to see the film and then called him from the theater and just like, "Hey, do you have any other scenes after that first scene?" And he's like, "Oh no, it's just the one." They're like, "Okay," okay. And he's like, "Why?" And they're like, "Well, we kind of want to leave and go home, and we were just we didn't want to miss any other bits with you in them."
And I have to feel like there's some embellishment there because look, I've seen a lot of movies, and I admittedly I like most movies,
Mm,
and I've never walked out of a film, but this isn't that bad.
yeah,
This can't have been real, but maybe it was. Maybe they just were like, all right, because you mentioned the like odd filming of things, right? The wide lenses up close, very Sam Raimi in that way, but it's and like these really Dutch angles and really extreme camera work, which again really makes me think, oh, his commercial background,
yeah,
because there were definitely a lot of directors from I would say mid 80s through the end of the 90s early 2000s that came out of either commercials or music videos, right? David Fincher, Michael Bay, Russell Mulcahy, they all got their start in those types of formats and moved into film. And so did Kinka Usher. So like I feel like there's some of that where you get this very stylized look that they do. And I didn't mind it, but I can see it being off-putting. What did you were you mostly okay with that, or did it kind of overstay its welcome? The real, especially, it was a lot of wide angles pushed right in on somebody's face talking.
yeah. Every one of those shots put me out of it. It kind of reminded me of like in like early Nicktoons, like the Ren and Stimpy and the early SpongeBob, where you get like the I call them the gross ups, where you get like a
Oh
close up
yeah.
on something and it's painted and looks disgusting. Like it felt
Hmm.
like that in live action. But yeah, I mean, I when I mention that story, like that story doesn't say to me like this is a terrible film. That's just an adorable story about a mom, and that like
It
a
is pretty
mom will
good.
go like a mom will be like, I would never see that movie in a million years, but my boy's in it. I'm gonna be in the theater. So that's an adorable story to me, not an insulting story. But yeah, I mean,
That's
it
fair.
did. Whenever that happened, those kind of shots happened in the film. It did kind of like take me out of the film for a moment. It kind of broke the fourth wall. And I didn't say I'm gonna walk out of the theater. Let me call Artie Lang. I
Uh-huh.
was just um, like it made me realize I'm watching a movie, and I started thinking about, oh, this is a commercial director. He must have done a shot like this in a Taco Bell commercial once, and like it made me think about things outside the story and kind of distracted me from the story.
I could see that, and I do think that it is a style of shooting because a lot of this was handheld as well. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it's a style that you're either going to like or it's really going to get under your skin quickly. Because like Sam Raimi will do that, but he
Yeah,
seemed to kind of know how much to use that and what
yeah,
situations to use it in. And I will say that I do think while I dig it, it is overused in this. There's too
yeah,
much of it. Like every conversation doesn't need to be right in there. I think Furious and his boss at the junkyard, I think that works
yeah.
in there. But I think that like the scene at home with the shoveler and his wife, we didn't need that to be shot that way. Like you could have
Mhm.
shot that in a different way, and maybe that works a little bit better. I don't know. Um, so yeah, I can
Yeah,
see
and
that for sure.
that's kind of what I meant about insincerity in tone, because like when Sam Raimi does a weird technique, it's because he's really excited about a way to tell a story beat. Like you
Hmm.
mentioned in his job, what we want to get across in that scene is he lives a disgusting life. He's working in a junkyard. He hates every second of it. Every second of it is like nails on a chalkboard to him, and he
Hmm.
cannot wait to go out and do what he loves to do. And so by like pushing in on that woman's face with the wide angle and making like every pore and every bodily fluid oozing out of her face like jump at the camera, you're feeling in his like, and then you cut to him shot normally, like you feel the way he feels, and you're
Hmm.
like, I get it, he wants to get out there. But then when they do the same technique when he's doing what he loves, then it ruins that effect, in my opinion, because you're not doing it for a story reason. You're doing it because of like, oh, that worked in the other one, let's just do that for the whole film. Like it
Yeah.
when you I love when directors use strange techniques, but it has to be for a story reason, because like an effect like that creates a physical reaction in the audience.
Hmm. Oh,
Um
for sure.
and so like you use that when you want them to have that physical reaction. And
You know who?
you can do that more than once, but yeah.
Yeah, and you know who else does that really, really well is uh, shoot, Brazil, Fear and Loathing in Las
Terry
Vegas.
Gilliam.
Terry Gilliam. Terry Gilliam knows how to use those like weird angles and push shots and all that kind of stuff to an effect. When he's doing Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, there's scenes where they're tripping on ether or acid or whatever, and you do that kind of stuff to put the audience into that same feeling of like revulsion and also what the hell is going on type of thing. But then he can back away and shoot things in a little more, in different ways. He understands the visual storytelling of the camera. I think maybe Kinka Usher, for some of it, it's like, well, all I've ever done are these short films, and now I have to
Yeah.
try and extrapolate that over a long period of time. Because another thing about this movie, I will say, I like this movie quite a bit, but I have a couple of things that are, I will call them complaints. They're gripes. It's a little too long. It is just a shade over 2 hours, like 2 hours and 1 minute or something like that. Um, I think that's a bit long for a feature film based on this kind of world with the comedy part of it, right? Because you start getting to most comedies are 90 minutes, um, maybe an hour 40. But you start getting to that 2 hour point, and it's like some of your jokes now get stretched out a little bit. Some of them maybe don't land, or the ones that do land, there's a long gap before your next one. And so I would have trimmed a bit of this down. I think, because it got a little. There was like going to Casanova's castle, coming back. They go there like 3 different times, and really
Yeah.
it should be 1, maybe 2 trips to the castle. You know, you can have the first time where they try to get in and the disco boys stop them, and then they make 1 more trip to the castle, but they actually ended up with 2 more into the castle
Yeah.
and having to come back to Doc Heller. Just kind of tightening that up a little bit, I think would have helped.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, that's my main gripe. I think I had one other one. I'll try and find it in my notes here. But what did you think of the runtime? Did you get the kind of a similar feeling? Did it feel a little bit long to you?
Yeah, it did feel long, and it wasn't. I think this story could be that long, but like you said, there was the repetition, and it felt like they were delaying. Like that scene when even when they don't go to the castle, there's the scene when they attack the car, and they're
Mhm.
actually finally winning something, and then they're like, okay, I guess we're done. Let's leave. And it's like, wait,
Yeah.
what was the point of stopping them then if you're just going to be like, I think we did pretty good. Let's let them go do their evil business and we'll just go regroup and talk about it. Like it felt like if things are driving forward in the plot, then it's not going to feel too long. But if you're like,
Right.
let's start and let's stop, let's start, let's stop, let's start, let's stop, it can feel long.
Yeah, it's the pacing issue of you can have that scene where they beat up the car and then leave and have it play that out a little bit more of the, hey, this is our first real victory. You know,
Hmm.
because they go and they celebrate, right? They go to the bar, they have some drinks, they're feeling good about themselves. But for all we know, this is the first time that Shoveler, Furious, and Raja have ever really come out on top, and
Hmm.
maybe play that up more. But even going like, I always forget, and I've seen this movie a few times now, I always forget how long into the movie it is before Captain Amazing gets killed.
Hmm.
Um, for whatever reason, my memory of it tends to be it's within the first 40 minutes, because that sort of would make a bit more sense, right? To
Yeah.
me. But it's like hour and 20. It's
Hmm.
right at the start of Act 3. And so that's a thing I would have maybe tried doing a little bit differently. But I did read that they got done shooting. It was like a 6-month shoot, which even for kind of a big budget film, that's a long time to be shooting, principal photography on a film. And then they went through and did all their edits, and they were just kind of trying to figure out and piece it together, because they had a ton of stuff for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
So much so, in fact, that an entire character got cut out of this. You know who was in this movie and actually shot scenes for it? Did you read about this?
Luis Guzman.
Yeah, Luis Guzman had a character as the owner of a Mexican restaurant in scenes that were shot, and then they just cut him. They weren't going to use it at all. And also Claire Forlani's character of Monica, which I don't remember her name ever being spoken. But she was supposed to have a much bigger role as well
Yeah.
and be more important. And instead, kind of, she's there and then you sort of forget about her. And then suddenly she's at Casanova's castle.
Hmm.
And there was a weird pacing thing with that where they showed the guys follow her and Roy when he walks her home.
Yeah.
And then you think, oh, based on that, when I was watching it, because it had been a few years since I'd watched it last. And on this rewatch, I was thinking that they kidnapped her then, because it would make sense, right? They're watching her
Yeah.
go to her apartment. But no, it's another, whatever it is, 30 or 40 minutes of movie before kind of all
Hmm.
that plays out. And there's some of that pacing thing, right? Like I feel like that's a start and stop, because if you pick that up and grab it right there,
Yeah.
because this, I think, all takes place in like 2 days, but it feels like longer than that
Yeah.
in terms of movie time. So there's just some pacing stuff. And some of that I have to think comes from, you get all these actors together, these comedians, and let them do a lot of ad libbing, and now you've got to sift through that and find what
Yeah.
works.
Hmm.
So that's where you need a director, I feel like, that has a really good idea of the story they want to tell. Like Kevin Smith famously didn't like people to ad lib because he had his story he wanted to tell, right?
Yeah.
But something like there's no way you can convince me that Nathan Lane and Robin Williams and all of them on The Birdcage didn't do a lot of ad libbing. But Mike
Hmm.
Nichols was a director who had a lot of experience by that point and could probably figure out I know what I'm working with and what story needs to be told, and so I can sort of sift through it a little bit easier. This felt like it was a lot of stuff that then they had to shape into what they wanted, if that makes sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, my only other real complaint was, and this isn't the movie's fault at all. In fact, for its time, it looks very good, but some of the visual effects that they did go for didn't quite work. And they look late 90s. And there
Yeah.
is a charm to that, but that's stuff that could be done and look a little more convincing today. Just some of the, I think the background plates and effects that they used for the most part looked okay, but some of the especially like the morph effect of Captain Amazing and Cassanova Frankenstein when they get hit by the, what was it, retro fabrillator, I can't remember what that thing was called, whatever the death beam was.
Well,
um,
neither could Tom Waits because he had to write all this dialogue on his fingers.
I'm
So
glad you read that. That cracks me up. It honestly, if I didn't know that, it just felt like Tom Waits being Tom Waits in that role, like the weirdness of his performance there. And then I read it and it makes so much more sense now why he's talking with his hands so much, because he's got to look at his hands to remember his lines. Um, Speaking of, are you a Tom Waits fan?
not particularly. I've
Okay.
enjoyed some of his strange film appearances.
So I love him in movies. Like when he pops up in movies, because I like weird and just like oddball stuff. There's something always compelling about that. Doesn't always work, but for whatever reason, Tom Waits has the charisma to pull off just like this weird thing. And he kills me in so many things because he always shows up for a smaller role, right? He's never the main focus of a lot of
Hmm.
stuff. It's he'll pop in, do something weird, and then be on his way. He had, was it Domino, I watched not too long ago for as a guest on another show, and he just like shows up out of nowhere in that movie,
Hmm.
is in it for 5 minutes, and is the most bizarre thing, and then just disappears. It felt like they didn't cast him in the movie so much as he just wandered by set one day, and they're like, "Hey Tom, you want to be in this? Just be yourself." And I love that. But here he is playing Doc Heller as the non-lethal weapons designer, and just all around eccentric genius.
And what a great way to introduce him, to have him just happen to be at the old folks' home, be like, "No, man, I don't live
Yes.
here. I'm here to get chicks."
Oh, that's again right there, tells you so much about this
Yeah.
character in 2 lines of dialogue that you can just kind of piece it together, and then you sort of forget about him for a while, and then they come back to him. That was one though that I feel like they came back, talked to him, left, and then came back to him again for one more gear up, and I
Yeah.
feel like that was just one gear up too many.
Yeah.
So, um, but I love Tom Waits. Same with Eddie Izzard. Eddie Izzard in this is Tony P, right? Because it's him and Praz from the Fugees was Tony C, as the Disco Boys. This gives you a very like product of its time thing going on too, where they're talking, they're nostalgic for disco 20 years ago, and
Hmm.
that's when you realize, oh wow, this movie's 26 years old. Uh, um, but I did like the sort of disco theme. I love themed gangs, right? That's always for me something fun and silly and comic booky, is to have these
Yeah.
gangs of villains that are themed. And that was something that ran through the movie, right? Because our heroes have their themes, their brands that they made, and they try to stick to, whether it makes sense or not. It makes sense to them. Like Hank Azaria's Blue Raja, he gets it for himself. It makes sense to him, even if everyone else is like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Um, it's also he's had a history with accents and characters that has changed over time. Uh,
Mm.
so
Yeah, in this movie, he's
um,
basically doing British Professor Frink.
yes, but here is the thing about the Blue Raja that I love as a character is it's silly, it's ridiculous, it's over the top, and then the reveal that it's all like a character he's playing.
Yeah.
Uh, I think I actually really like that. It makes it somewhat endearing for him
Mhm.
as a character, because he's very earnest about, I'm going to be the Blue Raja,
Mhm.
even though he still lives at home with his mom, who doesn't know what he's doing. He's burning, by the amount of smoke, a ridiculous amount of incense in his room, um, and stealing his mom's silverware because throwing forks is his thing. But there's also like this funny undertone of, they're superheroes, but they're nonviolent,
Mhm.
because he won't throw knives, even
Yeah.
though knives would be much more effective. He throws forks. Why? Because that's just the thing he wants.
Mm. Yeah, another thing about this film that made it, you talked about the like starts and stops, but also it has a distinct lack of Chekhov's anything. There's things that are set up like they're going to be important and
Mm-hmm.
they don't come back and you're waiting for that. Like when he's handed the special forks, it feels like
Yeah.
these are the forks that are going to be a big deal. And then at no point do you know which fork they are. He's just throwing forks. And like at the beginning, you see all like 47 Zeppelins in the sky, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh, there's gonna be a Zeppelin scene at the end," and you never get. It's like, when
Right.
do we get to the Zeppelin? Uh, Back as far as Simpsons references, but yeah, I mean, it feels like there's a lot of things that are set up because it was a fun story beat, and it like set up for things happen in the same reason that some of the shots happened. It looked cool, or it seems cool, but
Mm-hmm.
they never came back, and I was waiting for a lot of things to come back that never did.
Yeah. I mean, a few things did, right? Like the blame thrower,
Yeah,
that came back, but it was used once and that was it. And even then, that the scene where they did use it was really strange, the way it was
yeah,
shot, because it used that close up wide angle, but it didn't make sense because the where
yeah.
they placed the camera.
Yeah, when they brought back all of the weapons that they got, that was another thing where the callbacks were weird because the point of a callback is the first time you see it, you see how it's supposed to work, and then when it
Mhm.
comes back, something different happens. But in this one, it's just, oh, there's a repeat of the same scene with different characters.
Yeah. Yep. Although I did love the ideas behind some of those silly weapons. The blame thrower being maybe my favorite one.
Mhm.
Just the name. It's a perfect. That's a wrote it down on a napkin idea, and then, oh, we're gonna put it in the movie. How's it gonna work? I don't know. We'll figure that out later. Um, what was the
And,
other
and and
weapon? Oh,
sometimes
the
those work
shrinking.
because, yeah, the shrinking one, yeah.
The shrink gun again. That was one where they mentioned it, and then we saw it in play. But I feel like, to me, that felt like a punchline looking for a joke kind of
Yeah.
situation, and maybe could have been done better.
Mhm.
I do think the blame thrower at least paid off better, in that the not so goody mob arguing with each other. Which, by the way, love that, because that was the actual band, the R&B group or rap group, the Goody Mob, playing the not so goody mob. That's a funny joke. Did you catch? You might have caught it in reading about this. The other real good cameo. There was a couple
Uh,
uh,
Not sure which one you mean.
in the scene where all of the gangs are meeting with Cassanova Frankenstein towards the end. We had the suits, right? I like the suits downsizing everybody. And you had there was one in here, I didn't see him, but Sung Kang, who played Han in the Fast and Furious
Okay.
franchise and Better Off Tomorrow. He is one of the Susies, which I didn't
Mhm.
I didn't clock that at all. But one of the frat boys, one of the frat boys is Michael Bay, the
Makes
one that
sense.
says, "Hey man, can we take the brewskis?" That's Michael Bay.
Nice.
Because he was friends with Kinka Usher,
Yeah.
and it cracked me up because I recognized that hair. He's got that feathery, flowing hair.
Mhm.
um, his cameo, and then there were a couple cameos also in the. Oh, this was another scene. I like the scene in a vacuum, but it does kind of grind things to a halt. The whole backyard barbecue recruiting scene,
Mhm.
I think, is funny, but we did all of that to get one more character,
Yeah.
which didn't even need to be there. Like, you could have redone that and introduced the bowler in a very different way and saved yourself some time. So it's sort of, I like the scene, but you could have cut it and not changed anything. Um,
Mhm.
but it did have a couple fun cameos in there.
Yeah.
Uh, My favorite being Doug Jones. It's always great to see Doug Jones not in makeup and getting to just like see his face. And the kid they got for Pencilhead, son of Pencilhead, that kid understood the assignment. He was possibly my favorite thing in this movie, just because of how enthusiastic he is to be the son of Pencilhead. And then he also had Dane Cook show up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your mileage may vary on that, but the Waffler as a character is a funny idea. I'm not the biggest Dane Cook fan, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't
I mean, there are
care.
funny moments in there. There's funny movies throughout. So like that's when joy, when I get so excited when it's clear that someone on set was like, "Oh man, I got a really funny idea," and they were excited about it. And there's
Mhm.
bits in there, and like the best one is the Invisible Boy, which is the only thing that has nothing to do with the comics. And
Yeah.
I read that someone came up with it when they were drunk, and they're like, "Put it in the film," and it ended up being not only like the biggest arc in the film, but I think the best part of the film, like that his entire bit from beginning to end, and then the him actually getting to save the day with his power
Hmm.
is I think the absolute best part of the film, and it came from someone being excited about an idea.
Yeah. Yeah. That is how you take the dumb idea on the napkin sitting at the bar brainstorming and make it work, because they actually gave, like you said, an arc. There was something there. Kel Mitchell playing this kid who he's got this superpower, but it's so ridiculous. He can turn invisible as long as no one is looking at him.
Hmm.
But not only that, he can't even look at himself.
Yeah.
Um, and then the whole idea of like, this kid's delusional. He doesn't actually have a superpower. And I love how they play that. But he is so earnest in it. He just wants to make a difference. And they let him tag along. And you're right, he saves the day. And you know, it's also a funny moment too when they turn around and he's just standing there naked, because that's all his clothes. When he went invisible, that somehow makes you intangible as well.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter. We don't need to explain that. Um, but yeah, I liked his character. And I mean, Kel, he played him. There's where you were talking earlier about kind of like the different ideas of tone. He
Hmm.
played that so different in tone from Hank Azaria, who played it different from William H. Macy. I don't know why it all sort of works for me. Because on paper, if I told somebody that, it shouldn't work. Like the way these different characters act should feel like it's clashing, but I don't know why. It just came together for me really well.
Well, I think this film, as much as being a superhero team up film, it's also like a film about an acting troupe. Because in this
Hmm.
world, these are not like people's shtick doesn't come from like getting a radioactive spider bite. It comes from them like designing a character, designing an accent, designing a, a comedic bit, and they all are like actors who want to get sponsorships, and superheroing is a way to get to it. So it makes sense that everyone kind of uh, Blue Raja is the ham. He's like the Shakespearean actor who's trying to do things one way. Another guy is think of them as different acting styles. And Kel
Yeah,
Mitchell is just an excited kid who wants to give this a try, and so he plays it as with just youthful enthusiasm.
that's true, because you look at your three mains, especially Mr. Furious. Roy thinks that he has to be this character because he created this persona, down to when Monica's asking him his name and he's coming up with like a fake real name of, what was it, Phoenix Dirk
Yeah,
Dark Dirk.
yeah. So
That
so he's
whole,
the method actor. He's Jared Leto.
yes, yes, exactly. But he also is like the complete opposite of that at the same
Yeah,
time. In terms of like, he's the opposite of who he's trying to become.
yeah.
You got Blue Raja, who wants to be the superhero, wants to be known as a superhero doing good work, but he lives at home with his mom. And then
Mhm.
Shoveler is like the most sort of earnest of the group, in that he just wants to help people. He's got a family, he's got a good life at home. Like his wife is loving. I love they drop the line, he's been doing this for 12 years. 12 years. We don't once see him work throughout the whole thing, right? He doesn't like have to go to his day job at any point in these 2 days. So maybe we're on a weekend, I don't know. But 12 years, and his wife has put up with it. His
Mhm.
son was born after he started being the shoveler. because that boy isn't 12 years old. So like I kind of like that, those different backgrounds for those characters and how diverse they are, and yet they all get along because they all sort of understand, and they all that same common goal of like helping people and just being known for that. And then spleen is just the spleen.
Yeah, that's where we're like that cinematography thing where I wish they had done different things, because like we said, that close-up works with Ben Stiller's because you want to show his life is gross, but then when you get to the shoveler's home life, that should feel quaint and pleasant and like something that he wants to protect. But you
Yeah.
get those same kind of close-ups, and the set design makes it look like a Honeycombs commercial. Like she's going to open a box and a fuzzy creature is going to jump out. Like this should feel, his home life should feel real, so that you understand his character of like what he's risking and what he's giving, because he's not doing it because he doesn't want to be in his old regular life. He's doing it to protect his regular life, and you should feel the pain of him like telling his wife, that's a risk I'm going to have to take, when she says she won't be back when he comes, because he knows she'll be in danger. And I don't feel that when I hear that. Like that's such a good scene, the writing, but when I see it, I feel like I would want to get out of that house too, because it feels like Twilight Zone-y, like, why am I in a cereal commercial? Why is everything painted like that? Why are you zooming into close-ups of his wife's nose?
That's a really good point, right? Because Shoveler isn't like Blue Raja. Jeffrey is escaping his home life, or what he thinks he needs to escape his home life. Like he's got a loving, his mom is loving and supportive, and when she finds out what he's doing, that he's been kind of hiding from her, she's just proud of him for doing this thing. Furious doesn't really have a home life, and he's sort of trying to figure it out. And I think that's where like Monica as a character being in it more maybe would have made more sense. But Shoveler, Eddie's got a great home life, and that's a really cool insight. I like the idea of showing that being a lot simpler, so you get that connection to him, and you understand why he's doing what he's doing. And then of course you have other characters like Sphinx is just well, I'll let Blue Raja say what the Sphinx is, because I say this all the time in this exact manner.
Terribly mysterious.
Terribly mysterious. Sphinx, by the way, Sphinx was a character not from Flaming Carrot, if I remember right. He was from a different, like, defunct comic book that I think went out of business in like the 50s or something. And so the character just kind of went public domain. But it's kind of a fun trope of the character, especially a superhero that has like, it feels like a made up backstory, right? Oh, he's very mysterious. Well, what can you do? He's mysterious. And then you get Shoveler. Yeah, and he can cut guns in half with his mind. Like, that's just a kid making something up, but then that's actually what he can do. That is funny
and
to
then
me.
Never again.
Yes. Yeah, he only does it once. But that's funny. That's a good way to do a callback, though. That's like Hot Fuzz doing the Aaron A. Aronson joke and then paying that one off at the end. Also, any excuse to have Wes Studi show up in a movie, I'm for. I love that dude. And he had a couple of my favorite moments, because I also like the character that speaks in riddles, but then they make fun of him for it. Like they start pointing it out as, because they're getting more and more obvious and ridiculous as he talks more, with his like fortune cookie wisdom.
Yeah. When he's no longer mysterious because they know him.
Right, exactly. I have some other clips if you want to hear some more, because there was a ton. Like, this is a very quotable, clippable movie, especially if you've seen it in the past. Some of these lines really stick with you. Terribly mysterious is one. And I think it's also the just ridiculous accent that Hank Azaria is doing as Blue Raja. Just cracks me up. But like, even something as silly as he leans into the puns, which he didn't do a ton. And I think there again is that sort of ad-libbing and tonal battle that maybe he tried to slip a few of these in and maybe they weren't working, and so he kind of went away from it. But I did like,
Suppose I'll forgive you if you forget. Who's next?
the fake little embarrassed laughing is what gets me on that one. Um, Also, you don't get Hank Azaria without getting at least one of his Simpsons character voices popping up somewhere. When he sits on the fork, which for some reason is stuck, in there. But when he sits down on it, and you just hear this Professor Frink coming out there for sure. Yeah, that one got me. What did you think of his mom, by the way? Jeffrey's
Yeah,
mom.
I thought that was a great character, and that's one of those very sincere moments where it's like it's just as adorable as as Artie Artie Lang's mom. Like she's just really excited for what her son's doing. Like it sounds like again something she probably has never cared about superheroes before in her life. Maybe that's
Mhm.
why she doesn't know that her son is not a great superhero because she's like a superhero. That sounds great. I'm excited that you have something you care about. And
Mhm.
so like I think she just kind of like was really worried about her son. And then, oh, he actually does care about something. That's great. Maybe I'll have grandkids one day, maybe he'll leave. Oh, he does leave the house. Great. He's not on the
Yes.
marijuana. So yeah, I
Oh,
love that character.
that one I had to get.
Jeffrey,
What?
are you on the marijuana?
That's such a mom question. It got me. But I also loved when she shows him the silverware at the end. These were your great grandmothers. I was saving them for when you get married, but pretty sure that's not going to happen for a while. So here you go. Like, and it's slipped in there so well that one got me. I also like Jeffrey telling her,
I'm a superhero, mother.
because that is, I don't know what that accent is, but it's funny. You mentioned this one. I only got a couple of Tom Waits, but when you introduce your character with,
I'm here for the ladies.
and he's at the retirement home, tells me a lot about him. Also, I feel like that could just be Tom Waits. It doesn't necessarily have to be the character of Doc Heller. Or
Doctor, you are a genius.
That's what the card says.
that's what the card says. With the chickens in the background, because his card mentioned chicken rentals. Who rents a chicken? And
Vaya con Dios.
it's a good way to send him off.
Mm-hmm.
I did like coming back to him at the very end of the movie when they're getting interviewed the morning after, and he's like eating his cereal, watching the news, and getting all excited to see his team. I thought that was kind of adorable. Janeane Garofalo kind of steals this movie in a lot of ways. Her performance as the bowler, she has gone on to say like it's kind of not the movie they thought they were making. Like she doesn't know what was going on with it, which is weird because I feel like she's having a good time making this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it kind of comes through that way, and her character is a lot of fun. Arguing with her dad's skull inside the bowling ball kills me. What did you think of her?
Yeah, she's great, and it sounds like a lot of her monologues were just her talking. Like they just let her go, and none of it scripted. She's going off about indie film. She's going off like reenacting Shatner outtakes
I
and just having
didn't
fun.
know.
Yeah,
I did not know about the Shatner outtake thing until just recently. Reading about that
sabotage.
killed
Yeah,
me. Sabotage, and also the Stiller using whatever, don't do that, it sickens me, was apparently part of that same sabotage
yeah.
moment for Shatner.
Yeah, I recognize
That
that immediately because I've heard those outtakes. But yeah, they're just that's the moment when like it's clear some actors are having fun on set, and those
Mhm.
are the moments that I love. And all of her scenes feel like she's having fun on set.
Oh yeah, two in particular I really liked. I love them meeting Doc Heller, and then they learn, oh, all of his weapons are non-lethal, and her reaction and all the reaction to that is like, that is completely useless. Have a good day, and they walk out. And then she says this as they're walking out.
You see, that is why, in general, a mad scientist is less desirable than a garden variety scientist.
Kind of not wrong there, right? That was really good. I also really liked
But am I to understand you've inserted your father's skull inside of that ball for bowling?
No. Got the pro shop did it.
That's genuinely funny. Um, and I feel like, again, that's some ad lib. That's some comedians just playing off of each other. Like, have a rough idea and then go for it. So that worked for me. I mentioned this one already, but I'm gonna play it anyway because Michael Bay is one line.
Yes, of course. You may absolutely bring the brewskis.
He wants to bring the brewskis. You may absolutely bring the brewskis. That wasn't Michael Bay. That was Jeffrey Rush. But Jeffrey Rush's accent, also his sort of pseudo German accent, I loved. I loved it. Again, having fun. He's just hamming it up. And in a movie like this, you kind of have to. Okay. I had one. I got to play this one because I'll play the line and I'll tell you why.
Look, I'm a publicist, not a magician.
I'm a publicist, not a magician. All right. And that's spoken by Ricky Jay. There's a reason why that is so funny. And I didn't get it the first time I saw this movie. But in the subsequent years, I learned who Ricky Jay is. You're nodding, so I think you know as well. Ricky Jay famously was a magician.
Yeah.
So good. And a pretty good one, too.
Yeah. He's
but
the magic consultant on like any film that ever has magic in it, isn't he?
Pretty much was, yeah. I think he passed away a few years ago, but he was always a magic consultant, and so to have him say that line, that's good. That's a good way to do some fan service. Anybody that knew who he was at the time would get a kick out of that. Also, disco just being like a theme throughout this, like a disco themed gang. But I liked that their whole thing is disco look, but then they're just pulling out handguns, and so they make fun of them for that. Like, what do guns have to do with disco? And it's kind of serving double duty, right? Because our heroes are all about branding and theme. That's like a big thing for them. Kind of comes back to what you were talking about with looking at them as actors. But also coupled with that is the non-violent, non-gun, anti-gun stance of these characters as well. So I dug how that all went about, but I like where they're making fun of them for that. And that's all the disco boys do is listen to disco music.
To hear the people saying that disco is dead. Disco is not dead. Disco is life.
Look, Tony, I hate to tell you, but disco died. Let it go, man.
Well, they're just as far from disco as we are from 90s indie superhero movies.
Oh, there you go. Bringing reality into this, the crushing weight of reality. It's true. That's, it's funny. This movie is now, we're further from when this movie came out than the amount of time that Cassanova Frankenstein spent in prison. That's something else. I also, this is another one I quote quite a bit because I loved, this is a good setup and callback, right? Where so this is post the group has their first victory smashing up the car, the limo, which was a cool limo, by the way. The stretch, like what was that, 76 Corvette or whatever it was, mid 70s, like Stingray. They smash that up, they go off, and they're celebrating at the bar, and they're leaving, and the disco boys are waiting for him, and he calls them the dead guys, and that's when the Sphinx cuts their guns in half, and I just loved the immediate reaction of,
Okay. Yeah. 6 very nearly dead guys. We're on a temporary reprieve. That's it. That's your name.
the attempts at wit in this movie were from characters who fail at it are pretty good. That one and most of what Mr. Furious tries to say when he's trying to be witty.
Like the bad jokes work when the joke is that your characters are trying really hard to do a joke. This is as much a Muppet movie as it is Avengers, because they're an acting troupe who, like, they all have their bits. They're trying to be funny. They're trying to be scary. They're trying to project an image that maybe they can't necessarily always do.
Yep. I think my note was Roy gives very the jerk store called energy. You
Yeah.
know, he's got to come back, but not right away. And what he ends up using at first is not good. Um, and it just always got me. Pretty much everything. Like Ben Stiller, for someone who at one point just did not want to be on this set anymore, still does a pretty good job. He and Macy both, I think, are able to balance the silliness with actual like character moments. Um, to your point, some of that camera work kind of took the legs out from under those for you, which I get. But like they really did a pretty good job of giving you those like real heartfelt moments and then also really silly moments.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm just dunking on this movie because I'm saying things that felt off to me. But like to me,
Mhm.
that's what makes this movie fascinating, is because it feels like 100 people came into a room and each of them thought they were making a different movie, and
Kind of, yeah.
uh, and that's what makes it fun because it's like you never know what you're going to get from scene to scene, and it makes it fun to watch. It makes it fun to dissect. It makes it for me difficult to follow it as characters and story,
Mhm.
but there are people who put the work in to like make sure that their character uh, carries through. You can follow that character's arc, but it kind of has the feeling of what these characters are doing. They're bringing in people that all have different bits. They all are
Yeah.
in superheroing for different reasons. They're all some are very much about pacifism, some are very much about violence, and they're all coming together trying to do something, and it doesn't quite fit, and that's what happens in the movie. So if you think about it, it's like the perfect way to make a movie like this when
Yeah.
like no one got on the same page, because that's what's going on in the plot.
That's true, and it does lend itself to. There's a reason that this became a real cult classic because reviews for it were middling to positive. Like critics didn't hate the movie, but they didn't love it either. It did not do well. It was a $68-ish million movie, which isn't nothing, but it's not super high budget. It's still
Yeah.
pretty good budget for 99. Made about half of that worldwide. So it was a bomb. Um, but it's kind of like the perfect storm to make a cult classic out of it because there is some things being tried and some interesting ideas, and it has a lot of those things make it memorable. You remember certain things that maybe don't feel like they should, like Captain Amazing's death scene, for instance. That whole scene I think plays out really well, and it could have been where you have build up, build up, build up, and then he's gone, right? um and instead they really draw out that moment of the beam hitting him and the way it morphs and distorts, and it's all grotesque. I feel like it would have been funnier if it had just instantly fried him. Like in the moment, that would have been more of a laugh. But I don't know that it would necessarily have the same lasting impact
Mm.
on somebody seeing this for the first time with the way that because it's that 360 pan around him is they're doing just. I mean, that's weird looking. Um, so I kind of feel like there's moments of that too that sort of play into it and make it more memorable in a way.
Yeah. It feels like if this movie came out just a few years later, it would have been very different because there are
Oh,
like
for
a
sure.
few different trends that like someone's trying to make Batman, someone's trying to make Spawn, someone's trying to make indie comedy, like it. I just kind of realized that like if you look at like Tropic Thunder with Ben Stiller,
Hmm.
like it's very much very similar movie in that it's a bunch of actors who have their own egos, their own uh branding, and then they kind of have to like go from being actors to being action heroes, and that's kind of what this is, um where they're suddenly okay, now we're fighting the bad guy, and I think that would have, again with the cinematography, like if they'd shot the final action scene like Now It's Serious,
Hmm.
I think that end scene would have become a lot more powerful because like the choreography is very cartoony there, and like if it had been like now we have to take this seriously, it would have had more power to it. But again, that's not the movie they're making, and it's fun to watch all the tones clash. But it feels like if it would have come out a few years later, maybe it would have been a much very different, more cohesive movie. And I don't know if that would have been better or not. Like,
It's hard to say. I also think that from a audience standpoint, when I think back to 1999, we hadn't quite gotten, like, we didn't have superhero movies that were dominating the box
yeah,
office. We had superhero movies. Batman had been around. We were 4 movies into Batman, but this was towing that line between Schumacher's uh, campy Batman and a grittier, darker tone of a movie. And so I think that could be a little bit sort of hit or miss. Um, we weren't, obviously, as I said, in film, we weren't deconstructing superheroes yet. We were still kind of very earnest in our superhero films. And so I just wonder if this movie comes out a few years later, it certainly is made differently, but also might hit differently. Because
hmm
you take this, you amp up the violence and the gross factor of it, and you get The Boys
yeah,
in a lot of ways. And so it just makes you wonder, like, was this just a little bit too early? Like, maybe the producers at Universal had the right idea. It wasn't the right environment for this movie yet. Because they greenlit
yeah,
this, I think, in 97 or something like that, because they thought it was a cool idea. Um, but maybe it was just a little too early to be doing it. And on top of, because you don't get DeVito or even Ben Stiller directing it, you get somebody who doesn't have the background in film, in feature film. I just wonder how different that would be too.
hmm
So,
and
yeah,
it feels
would
like
it be
they could pick
better or
this
not?
up
I'm not
right
sure.
now and do they could do like a Lego sequel right now with the exact
Oh,
same
for sure.
actors and give it a more consistent tone, and I think it would be a hit. Like if they made it standalone enough that like it has the name recognition,
For
people
sure.
know, people remember Mystery Men. Maybe they don't necessarily remember everything about it, but you could just be like, hey, it's Ben Stiller, William H. Macy, Hank Azaria as aging superheroes trying to put together a team. Hey, now Flaming Carrot, that's obviously going to be in there.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. And you would do that now. Like, that is one major difference, is Flaming Carrot would be there in something made today
yeah,
versus, I get not putting it in the movie in 1999 because there's no way to make that work visually without it falling into, as they said, Howard the Duck, Uncanny Valley,
yeah.
obvious rubber mask type of a situation. Um,
Mm.
Question for you. If you were to see a sequel to this done today, like a legacy type sequel, um, would you want it as a standalone film, or would you want it as like a 4 to 6 episode sort of Watchmen style, or that type of series to give it a little bit more of a breathable story? Which do you think would work better for this?
Uh, Personally, I always lean toward movie because there are some amazing series being done these days, but way too many of
Mhm.
them are a movie that they split up into like 8 chunks and added some filler in the middle. I
Mhm.
too many series these days, like if they have a movie script and then instead of like, oh well, let's write what happens next for episode 2, they're like, well, let's just stretch episode 1 across 17 hours. So I would say
Sure.
go for movie. That's what I would want.
Because I wonder if you did the series, if you conceived it as a series, and
Mhm.
in the legacy part of it, because your actors are going to be 25 years older, right? So
Yeah.
they're going to be aging out. And I wonder if you make it a passing the torch type of thing,
Mhm.
that could work to stretch that story out, because you could have them do something and fail and maybe need to bring in new recruits.
Yeah.
I sort
Well,
of, I will say though, I do sort of agree with, like, I feel like one movie. This is where a 2 hour runtime could work.
yeah. I mean, I feel series can be done. Like The Boys and Invincible are excellent examples of exactly this. This is
Mhm.
exactly what they're doing. But I think like if you're talking about passing the torch, since this is a deconstruction, the funniest thing to do would be having it be a pass the torch story, but Ben Stiller won't pass the torch.
Yeah,
The
right.
old guys the old guys like bring all the new recruits and then won't let them do anything and keep doing all the action scenes
Oh,
and
that would be perfect.
worse at it than they were in the 90s because they're old now, but
Right.
somehow they still end up saving the day.
Plus, you could actually have given some of the side characters a little bit more, like the doctor, the psychiatrist that helps get Casanova out of prison
Hmm.
and is working with him. She just sort of disappears.
Yeah.
She's there, and then we forgot about that character. That was one I always kind of felt like needed something more. But that's sort of plays into, we had some odd pacing in this movie, and like Casanova doesn't get a ton of story development. He's just sort of bad guy doing bad guy things.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and there are like, have you watched Invincible?
I've only seen a little bit of it. I need to
Yeah.
watch more of it.
Yeah, well, I mean that does what this is trying to do very well, in that every single character you care about. Like there's like characters that like background characters that jump out of the way of a rock that like
Mhm.
you know more about than some of the characters in major characters in blockbusters, and they'll come back throughout the series and you'll find out like, oh, the father and the son of and stepson have started to connect and all this, and all they do
Hmm.
is jump out of the way of things that fall. And there's so many characters, but they all have some connection. And when someone decides to make something a series, it can be done very, very well. So if they set out to do it, it could be uh, could work for this.
Yeah, I agree with you in that it's hard to tell a movie stretched out in a few episodes. Like the creator doing, I think, the best job with that right now is Mike Flanagan. He has this ability to tell a story over several parts where you don't feel the filler episodes as much.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't feel like, oh, okay, we're at episode. He somehow is able to pace those out. So like that midway point, now everything starts to really ramp up as opposed to feeling like, oh, we're stretching this out. Um, but you're right, there are a lot of series that do that. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of six of one, half a dozen of the other. You have to know what you're doing when you start out, and I think that's part of it, right? A cohesive vision.
Mhm.
But I think this could work in that way. But I wouldn't want to do it for more than, again, I say like 4 to 6 episodes and tell a story with that if you were going
Yeah.
to do it as a series. And the bummer of it is we wouldn't be able to have Spleen anymore because Paul Rubens,
Mhm.
who, again, he was having fun. Also, one last kind of fun little thing: the one of the funnier moments in this is when they're in the junkyard and that explosion happens behind Spleen, and he kind of
Mhm.
oh, excuse me, that wasn't planned. That was an oops, a blooper that made it into the final movie, because somebody accidentally like dropped a lighter into something and it exploded behind him,
Mhm.
and so he just ran with it, which is a testament to like the professional level that somebody like Paul Rubens has in their comedy
Mhm.
to be able to play off that thing and make it into a funny moment. I really like that. Overall, it sounds like you kind of did enjoy the movie, though.
Yeah, I enjoyed watching it, and I just now, as we were having this conversation, I finally solved the mystery of why I never watched that movie. I finally remembered that the month that this movie came out in 1999 at the Showcase Cinemas where I worked,
Hmm.
someone had been pocketing popcorn money at the register of the theater, and the staff told us that all of our free movie passes were on hold until someone turned in who did it, and so
Oh
I
no.
couldn't go see it. And
Mm.
but so I while it was in theaters, I was the crime fighter trying to crack the case and find out who was pocketing the popcorn money. But then,
Oh.
people are used to now like a movie's on streaming like within 3 weeks of being in a theater. But back then it was like a year later it would come out on home video. And
Hmm.
so by the time it came out, I had just seen the ending so many times that I assumed I'd watched it and
Yeah,
never
I could
actually
see that.
uh and never actually watched it. So I finally got to watch it last night, and yeah, it was a fun experience. It is a movie that I watched as a movie. Like it didn't pull me into the story in the way
Mhm.
that I usually do, but that's a fascinating way to watch a movie as well. And like I'm watching all the decisions and like seeing how different people approached it. And again, that very much fits with the characters. So it's a fun thing to watch. And all the starts and stops kind of match the starts and stops of the characters who are kind of bad at what they do and don't know how to be superheroes, and some are in it for the right reasons, some are in it for the wrong reasons, and so yeah, it's an interesting object.
Yeah, and it also I think is very much a product of its time too.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
very much late '90s. It's also uh, the movie responsible for giving us Smash Mouth's All Star. Everyone likes to
Mhm.
talk about Shrek. That was 2 years later. This movie was where it originally came from.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think Mystery Men. I'm not sure. Your mileage may vary on how much you like Smash Mouth's All Star, but you can thank Mystery Men for giving it to us. So excellent. Well, Ryan, what have you got going on right now? You want to let people know about?
Well, if you want to see my work, go to ryanestrada.com. There's thousands of pages of free comics there, but it also the shows you the books you can find in bookstores. I have a series of books about my wife's experiences in a banned book club in 1980s Korea when the cops were hunting her down for smuggling illegal reading material. That when we started it was about history, but now it's very much relating to what happening in America. We
Oh,
have No Rules Tonight, just came out last October, the second in the series. And we have a new one coming out this October called Good Old Fashioned Korean Spirit. And yeah, I hope people check those out and check out all the other stuff at ryanestrada.com.
awesome. RyanEstrada.com. Definitely check that out. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. This was a ton of fun. It'd been too long since you had been on, so it was good to have you back.
All right. I'm happy to come on anytime.
Excellent. Now, if you do like this show, you can catch it live on Sunday nights, twitch.tv/TV's Travis. I'm here pretty much every Sunday. And then it comes out in podcast form Wednesdays, anywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. You can catch the video version of it there or audio. Either one works. And you can go to tvstravis.com and find links to my stuff, including the brand new show. I don't have it on the website yet, but hopefully by the time you're listening to this, I will have it posted there. 24 FPS Presents with Stephen Adams and myself as we go through season 1 of Fast and Curious. So that's a new show that I've got going on. And you can also find things like the Patreon for this, which lets me do things like my live show in Las Vegas this year or my live at Dragon Con that will be coming up in a few months. So patreon.com/WYHS for that. And that also gets you things like special parts of the Discord server, my first watch diaries, which I am woefully behind on, and I need to record a few of those as I finish up Star Wars Ahsoka, and all of that. Now, next week, I have Joe Hart coming on. Joe has never seen American Psycho and wants to watch it. So we're going to do that. And I haven't seen American Psycho in about 25 years. So it'll be interesting to see how much of it I actually remember versus the memes and things that are out there. So I can't wait to do that. And I can't wait to talk about this with somebody because I have very distinct memories of when I did see this for the first time and kind of how I felt about it. So that should be interesting. But that'll be coming up next week. American Psycho with Joe Hart. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for being here. Folks, check out ryanestrada.com and we'll get you back on in the not too distant future. No more, a year or two between you being on the show. So until next time, everybody, in American Psycho, just remember to enjoy your movies and let's be excellent to each other. All right? There's been Wait You haven't seen.
That's right. The police said it was an accident. He'd come home late one night and fell down an elevator shaft. onto some bullets.
You know, I've always suspected a bit of foul play.
As have I.
That is wonderfully timed out. That's good comedians just playing off of each other.